Good day to you. Dr. Dan Miller, Historical Solutions, LLC. We're on the 250 River with Dr. Dan. It's top 5 for this week that runs us up to and ends on May 1st, 250 years ago, May 1st, 1775, from hour 2025. So hope you're doing well. Kind of a gray, chilly-ish day. Do they call this blackberry winter in places? I don't know. But it's a little cool, but still a great day as far as I'm concerned. I thrive on days like this. Hope you're doing the same thing. Hope you're thriving right now. Got some coffee out here, sitting in my Hogwarts cup and everything. So, forgive me while I indulge. It tastes good on a day like this. So let's thank our sponsor for our episode 26. Man, our sponsor today, 99% fact, 1% fiction. Our sponsor is Westminster Magazine. Westminster Magazine, where you can go for the latest, freshest, and most deeply held thoughts regarding history and geography and politics, arts and science, all rolled together. The Westminster Magazine. Wherever fine written products are sold near you, the new edition is just out. It's a pantheon of taste. That's the Westminster Magazine. Thank you to them for their 99 and 1% sponsorship of today's episode number 26. Now, exciting show for you today. So we are learning, right? We're learning from Disney. We're learning from Apple. We're learning from, I don't know, Procter and Gamble and Netflix and anybody else who cross markets. Sometimes we're aware of it, sometimes we're not, but it's a frequent practice. Well, we're going to do it here today, first time ever, episode 26 on the 250 River with Dr. Dan. So remember our sponsor, the Westminster Magazine. Number 5 on our top 5 is the latest edition of the Westminster Magazine, and here's what we're talking about. You're going to see the Magna Carta laying on the ground. 1215 from Runnymede, right? That's the story. Magna Carta copy laying on the ground. You're going to see a copy of the unwritten British Constitution laying on the ground, and they're about to be ripped up by a horse and carriage that's pulling George III and the Chief Justice Lord Mansfield. They're just inches, seconds away from tearing up those two things lying on the ground. Now, we've got kind of a double weird going on here, right? So if you're with me, what do you mean there's a copy of Magna Carta laying on the ground? What do you mean there's a copy of an unwritten document, the British Constitution, a copy laying on the ground? That's crazy. It is crazy. Unless you're a political cartoonist and your work is being featured in this month's newest edition of the Westminster Review. Because you see, there's an Englishman or an Englishwoman, we don't know which, who is a sketch artist who has drawn a political cartoon for publication in this month's edition of the review. Remember, a pantheon of taste. And in this cartoon, it depicts these two fictitious copies laying on the ground, and this ferocious horse or whatever pulling the King of England and the primary judicial official of England, pulling them in a carriage, about ready to rip up the rights that English men and women on the eastern side of the Atlantic enjoy in England, and English men and women on the western side of the Atlantic enjoy as colonists of Great Britain. So, this is not a 500-word essay. This is not a 1,000-word article that is normally the case in the Westminster Review. This is pure image, 100% image. It's visual. It's meant to stir emotions, and it's meant to help drive the pro-colonial side among the readership of the Westminster Review. So, nothing new under the sun. Ecclesiastes tells us, the book of Ecclesiastes tells us, and that's the case with this. We've got images being shaped and made and created and put in front of people to try to stir them to action. So the cartoonist is clearly saying the rights that we enjoy, they are at risk in the colonies, which means they are at risk here. Remember, Paul Revere said the British are coming, the British are coming. This cartoonist is saying the danger is coming, the danger is coming. It's the same danger on both sides of the Atlantic. So that's number 5. Cross marketing, as we're learning to do for the Westminster Review. Number 4. Number 4 is a tavern meeting. It's Easton's Tavern in the small town, the small community of Pittsfield, Massachusetts, all the way out near the western border of Massachusetts. At the time, where New York is on the other side of the border. There's a meeting between 3 guys at Easton's Tavern. And in the meeting, the 3 of them are hatching a plan. And the plan is that we're going to collect our militias together, our respective militias here as 3 local leaders. And we're going to go west to Fort Ticonderoga, a British fort that has this iconic status and standing in the British colonial mind as it sits in 1775 because of all the wars that have occurred up and down that western highway of river and lake of invasion, north to south and south to north, ever since. It's been 100 years of this stuff, practically. Fort Ticonderoga sits at a choke point along that route. Well, these 3 guys say, man, we're getting together, our group, and we're heading west, and we're going to smash that baby. We're going to claim that baby for the colonies, for the colonial cause, for us, as in light of the disaster or the triumph at Lexington and Concord and the Old Bay Road back in mid-April. In light of all of that, this is our next step. This is our next strike, is to go seize that now run down fort, but really it's like Pearl Harbor in its imagery. Talk about imagery. It's like Pearl Harbor will be for later Americans. So that's what they want to do as they sit around the tavern table in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, 250 years ago this week. So that's number 4. Number 3 on our top 5 list. I know, this is a great top 5 list this time around. Number 3. Peyton Randolph is writing a letter, has sent a letter. And Peyton Randolph is a highly respected, highly connected, highly wealthy Virginian. And he was the guy chosen as the officer to kind of help, the elected official to kind of help run the Congress last fall in Philadelphia, that first Congress that met in September and October of 1774. He was the guy that kind of presided over that, right? So he's a big name. Peyton Randolph hears, and he knows that the British Royal Imperial Governor, Lord Dunmore, has ordered and successfully seized the gunpowder, a supply of gunpowder that's in the official colony magazine or storehouse in Williamsburg. He's ordered that seized. He knows that if I let the wrong people get their hands on that, we've got all kinds of problems. He's a big pro-imperial rights guy, and so this is his strike to try to get the upper hand in the colony of Virginia. Peyton Randolph knows that's happened, number 1. He knows also that there are very credible reports of local militia in towns around Virginia organizing. They're pissed off, they're outraged, and they're ready to march on Williamsburg and undo this deed, whatever that means. Undo this deed. So, Fredericksburg is one of the communities of militia that are getting ready to march onto Williamsburg. Randolph writes his letter, and he says, yes, it's an outrage. Yes, we don't want this to stand. But no, 1,000 times no. We don't want to precipitate violence. We don't want to launch our own versions of what we just have found out has been going on outside of Boston and Massachusetts, Lexington, Concord, the Old Bay Road. We don't want that here, because we don't know where any of this is going, and the spilling of blood is not how we want this to go. We want to undo stuff, but we want to undo it peacefully, orderly, in control, sensibly. Okay, that's what he's got. That's what he's written in the letter. In essence, that's what he's written in the letter. And he sent it on to Fredericksburg, hoping that that's going to be enough to cause them to take a step and say, "Oh, okay, maybe he's right. Maybe he's right." We don't know how it's going to be received. The other thing we don't know, how many other groups are there out there that won't get a letter like that from Peyton Randolph? At any rate, that's number 3 on our list. Now, I just want to make a quick little point here. Notice what's going on. We've now jumped out of Boston and Massachusetts. We've jumped out of that boiling kettle, or we've got blood in the water, blood in the hot water from Lexington, Concord, Old Bay Road. We're out of that now. We're in Virginia, and the same pot is rattling, and it might explode and cause bloodshed here too. This is what Randolph's wanting to avoid. So that's number 3. Now number 2 and number 1 come from the same place. Kind of unusual, but I'll tell you what we've got going on. So this is number 2 of our top 5. But let me set it up. So 1 and 2 are from the same thing. I'm splitting them out. Joseph Warren, we're back in Massachusetts. Joseph Warren is one of the most influential members of the Massachusetts Provincial Assembly. They're the revolutionary government now of most of Massachusetts, where you don't see a red coat pointing a gun or aiming a cannon. Within the spaces of the guns and the cannons that they can shoot and fire and discharge, that's the space that the British control, essentially Boston, Greater Boston. Outside of that space, it's the revolutionary government led by the Provincial Assembly of Massachusetts and led by people just like Dr. Joseph Warren. So, as the leading or a leading member of the Assembly, Provincial Assembly, Joseph Warren writes a letter on behalf of the Assembly. And he writes a letter to Benjamin Franklin, and he sends it off to London, believing, guessing that Franklin's still over there. And the point of the letter is to ask Franklin, hey, can you be our lobbyist again? Things have just gone to hell. They could get even worse. Can you be our lobbyist again? That's the overall thrust of the letter that Warren has written on behalf of the Assembly. Again, nobody knows. Franklin's not even there anymore. He's left. He may already be back in Philadelphia, and if he's not, he's in the western Atlantic, close to it. So that's kind of an interesting thing about the flow of information, right? But there's 2 chunks in this letter, and number 2 is our first chunk. Number 2, he uses a phrase, and in describing about how things have gone to hell, he uses a particular phrase, and he calls it this unnatural war. That's a quote, unnatural war. That's the description, the euphemism or synonym for things having gone to hell. So that's why we need people like you, Dr. Franklin, to be our lobbyists, etc., etc. I really want you to think about that. Unnatural war. That's such an interesting thing. I've been asked this a few times now. How did they think of the conflict? Most of the people are scared to death of this conflict. They regard civil war as the worst kind of war. A war from within. One side of the body against another side of the body. That's a horrific condition. Horrific is another word you'll often see used. It's interesting though, Warren takes it and says it's unnatural, which suggests that there's some natural form of war. We won't get into the whole just war theory, but certainly that's where he's probably headed if he thought about it long enough. He's extremely bright, so he'd get there. But the unnatural war. So that's number 2, that phrase from this letter. And then finally, number 1, another phrase from this letter. Number 1 in our top 5, sorry. Relax, there's not 5 more. Here it is. I've got to remind myself. In there, he goes on a little bit at length, 3-4 lines, about, quote, 2, TWO, 2 Englands. There are 2 Englands. This goes back to our cross-marketed piece here of the cartoon that was number 5. This is another expression of what the cartoon was depicting. Warren says there's 2 Englands. Both of these Englands believe in the rights and liberties and freedoms that were gained at places like Runnymede with Magna Carta in the year 1215 and ever since in various critical moments of British history, English history. We all believe that those are layered on top of other forms of rights too, like the Bible, God, rights from God, and providence, and so forth, and then ancient rights from classical Greece and Rome. These 2 Englands live this life. Now, it's not all of them. We wouldn't have this unnatural war going on, would we? From Lexington, Concord, and the Old Bay Road. We wouldn't have any of that happening. But there are factions. There's a faction, a group in the Old England that still believes it. And clearly there's a very strong group here in New England that believes it too. There are 2 Englands, and they like one another. They live together. So I found that a really interesting reference, the 2 Englands. Now, he says in his letter that we know one of these Englands, and he means new, one of these Englands is ready to pay the price of death in pursuit of these liberties. We don't know about the other England. We'll see what price they're willing to pay. In other words, the people who are going to see that cartoon. We'll see what price they're willing to pay. Will they come to our aid? We hope so. We pray so. But these 2 Englands have to come together to make another version, or the next iteration of a new world that was first secured in places like Runnymede in the year 1215. So, what's the big idea? This is my new kind of wrap-up feature. What's the big idea, Dan? Well, I got a couple. Stay with me, please. I know I'm running a little long. Just hang in. We've got a big shift, right? We've had the big shift. The Union really took form with that Congress that began to meet last September. That's the Union really coming together and expressing itself clearly as an organized entity. And at the same time, we've got this, by the way, they're looking back to the Old Englands and Runnymede and the Bible and other kinds of a cherished past that they're trying to protect and advance and regrow in a new form. So that's over here. But then we've got this big shift that's happened. Bloodshed, violence, guns, knives, bayonets, cannon, on and on. War making and warfare. That's just started. Nobody wanted that. The Union existed for 6 months prior to that, before any of that had ever happened on that scale. Nobody wants that, but now we've got this big shift that's occurred, and now we're in that. So beforehand, it was not war. It was weird and kind of disorderly, sure, but it wasn't war. But now it seems like this is where we are. We got a big shift here, and we've got this cherished past over here. So the thing I want to end you with is, can they coexist? And more than that, beyond coexistence, can they complement and reinforce one another? Those are 2 things we don't know. They don't know. Can they coexist and not completely explode off of one another? And more than that, can they come together, complement, reinforce, and build from one another, hand in glove? I'm Dan Miller, Historical Solutions, LLC. Let me see if my little device here is going to work. It's not going to work. It never does on stopping this thing. I appreciate you hanging out with me. Look for the full story in Americanism Redux, May 1st, 1775, and I'll see you down the road for the next installment, episode 27. Take care and have a great week.